Welcome in, Taryn.
Welcome back, Sheridan. I heard with the new download for Firestorm, it's been causing a lot of voice issues.
Yay.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, I think we're good to get started. What do you guys think?
All set, Rebella? Not yet. Okay. We'll just stand up here and look like a Pride Charlie's Angels until you're ready for us. No worries. Look, we can do dramatic poses. Everybody back to back.
You're fine. Oh, I did. I took a picture of it earlier. We were all three posing in different directions with our flags.
Welcome in, Lucretia.
Hey, Lucretia.
Okay. Okay. No problem. All right. Ready? Aaron?
Oh, is that the go-ahead?
Yeah, I believe that we have the go-ahead now.
All right.
Okay, well, hello and welcome everyone. All of us at Circle Mental Health would like to thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. For those who may not already know, we are the events team for CMH. So we have been creating and hosting events for Circle for, I believe, about a year now. The most recent events were the Mental Health Awareness Gala in May and CMH's 2024 Pride, I think just last week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So why would the events team be here today speaking to all of you about, for a Pride workshop? That would be because Nick, Rhys, and I also fall within the LGBTQ spectrum and proudly represent just a small portion of the LGBTQ staff and members within Circle Mental Health. So with that said, allow us to introduce ourselves. I'm Aaron. I've been with CMH for a little over a year now. I'm the events coordinator and also a mentor. I identify as a non-binary, gender fluid pansexual, which is a mouthful. So what does that mean? In simple terms, I don't have a specific gender that I connect with, so to speak, and I tend to flow between masculine and feminine energies. It also means that my romantic attraction isn't tied to any specific gender or identity. And Nick, I believe you're up.
Learns LGBTQ language. Thank you, Carla. Nick, are you ready?
Oh, yes, I'm ready. Hi, my name is Nick. I do a lot of things in SL. I'm actually turning 40 in a few weeks. In my personal life, I battle with mood disorders and psychosis. Despite my struggles, I still run a very busy life. I'm also under the transgender umbrella. Being queer, trans, and disabled has come to form the basis of my foundations. I'm an advocate for many rights. My background comes from studying art, gender, and ethnic studies, and educating myself through adversity. A lot of my real-life experience has been a struggle, to say the least. I've been a part of Circle from the beginning, and have been involved with events on several different mental health organizations in SL, as well as Circle Mental Health. I also have experience in the ways of building and SIM management. I'm a DJ, artist, and activist, and I hope today I can leave you all with a new word bank of fun new things.
Hey, y'all. I'm Rhys. I've been with CMH for a little over a year now, and I actually found it via Nick and Aaron. I'm also a member of the CMH events team. You could say that I'm the unofficial event operations part of the team. I tend to make sure that all the info is easily found via my organizational skills. And I love being a part of creating these happy spaces for people to come together and celebrate something, especially when that happiness can be difficult to find at times. I'm also a part of the LGBT community. Like Aaron, I am non-binary, gender fluid, and pansexual. However, I am also demisexual and gray asexual. Demisexual means I need to form an emotional connection with someone before any sexual attraction happens. And gray asexual means, for me, that my ability to feel or crave sexual attraction or can waver on and off depending on where my mindset is that day. It's never about the other person. It's always about where I am within myself, if that makes sense. I deal with depression, anxiety, and CPTSD. I have a lot of dissociation and things like that happens. And when I found Circle, I was at a pretty low point. But with the help of these two people on stage with me and many of the members and staff with Circle, I found a place where I felt seen and heard and accepted and loved. And that's why I love being part of the events team, to be able to do that for others. So, now that you know who we are, let's play a little game, shall we? I promise it's not like that horror movie where we play a game, okay? But it's called Three Doors and a Kitchen Table. So, how this works is you guys get to pick a door, and we get to show you what's behind it. The metaphorical door, if you will. And we get to all then sit down at the metaphorical kitchen table afterwards and discuss what we've learned from these doors. We will go with the first person in chat to pick a number, and the numbers are 1, 2, or 3. Got it? We're starting now. 1, 2, or 3. 3. All right. Roxy has said 3. So, let's see what's behind our first door. Our first door is number 3, and that would be my topic. It is the importance of inclusion. So, let me get to that. In a world that thrives on diversity, the importance of inclusivity cannot be overstated, especially when considering the mental health of individuals within the LGBTQ community. Inclusivity, the practice of including people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized, is a crucial element in fostering a sense of belonging and acceptance. For LGBTQ plus individuals who often face social isolation due to stigma and discrimination, this sense of belonging can be a lifeline. The following statistics, they're short, bear with me, have been taken from the Trevor Project, psychiatry.org, and mentalhealthuk.org. Did you know that 50% of LGBTQ plus youth wanted mental health care in the past year and were unable to get it? 50%. That's half. According to the statistics, LGBTQ plus individuals are 2.5 times more likely to experience depression, anxiety, substance misuse compared to heterosexual individuals. Gay and bisexual men are 4 times more likely to attempt unaliving themselves for the sake of a YouTube stream than the rest of the population. And lastly, 39% of LGBTQIA plus youth seriously considered unaliving this past year, including a whopping 46% being transgender and non-binary young people. What do many of these have in common? Anyone? "46, Carla. Yes. Yes. So many of these people have dealt with some form of social isolation. Okay? Social isolation can have profound effects on an individual's mental health, leading to increased risks of, get this, guys, depression, anxiety disorders, lower self-esteem, sleep problems, increased stress, which we know also causes other health problems, suicidal ideation, and other health issues from that even. For LGBTQ plus individuals, these risks can be significantly higher due to the double burden of social isolation and social or societal prejudice. The lack of inclusivity can exacerbate feelings of loneliness, rejection, and inclusion, further compounding the impact on mental health. Therefore, promoting inclusivity and reducing social isolation are not just moral imperatives, but are crucial for improving the mental health outcomes of LGBTQ plus individuals. By fostering an inclusive environment, we can help mitigate the effects of social isolation, affirm the identities and experiences of LGBTQ plus individuals, and contribute to a healthier, more empathic society. This is a call to action for all of us. As individuals, as a society, whether LGBTQ or not, to champion inclusivity and stand against isolation, because everyone deserves to be seen, heard, and accepted for who they are, just like I found at CMH and among these people. But how exactly do we do that? You know, this is a lot of talk. It's a lot of facts. But how do we do it? How do we put the rubber to the road? So, what are ways that we can help people to feel seen and heard? I'm open. I want to hear from you guys. This is an interactive thing. We're not just going to stand up here and talk at you. It's a workshop for a reason. So, what are ways that you have or you've thought of that can help with inclusivity in our community, in our lives? Anyone? I see Deb typing. Be open about who and what we are, Deb says. Yes. Yeah. Be open. Yeah. Letting people know what's going on and explaining those things certainly helps. It helps people understand. Also, on the other end, if you don't understand, to ask, to research, to use Google. It's a wonderful thing. And part of that is actually on my list, which is respecting and acknowledging diversity in individuals. Our backgrounds, experiences, perspectives, and identities are something to celebrate, not shy away from. Actively listening to our stories, showing us that you value our voice. For many LGBT people, they've never been taken seriously and they've never been judged. And they've been judged before they even open their mouths. But that cycle can stop with you, with us. We have the power to break it and give hope, just by actively listening to someone and leaning in to engage. So that comes with speaking and listening, speaking up and truly listening in, listening to understand, not to respond. Carla says, I just live my life and don't get upset by anyone being ignorant. Absolutely. That is a thing too. That's a power move. I mean, that is something that's like, I know who I am and I'm going to continue to exist and be here. And this is, that is an inclusion within itself. Absolutely. Group supports are definitely a way to help include. Absolutely, Erin. I agree. And that is one of the things on my list as well. Promoting inclusive policies and creating safe spaces. If you're in a position of influence, advocate. Anti-discrimination policies and mental health support are big ones. Whether you are a big company, a server on Discord, which we all know, a small group in SL maybe, or a gathering of friends in your home, it all counts to someone who's in vital need of feeling safe and accepted. Please do not discredit the power of the privilege you may hold in these spaces. Yes, absolutely. Roxy says digital group support does help a lot. It does, especially because think about this. In a digital place, we can be whoever we want, right? And for LGBTQ people specifically, that's difficult sometimes to exist in their bodies. There's something that we'll learn about later with Nick's topic that has to do with dysphoria. And, that plays a part of why digital spaces are so important to be a safe place. So another thing is advocating for equality, standing up against discrimination and harassment, questioning if equal rights and equal representation are present in the workplace, in your favorite coffee shop or grocery stores, on the big screen, in books you're reading, when voting, all of the other areas of life. Just like the flag at our events, which if you've been to a CMH event that we throw, you'll notice that we purposely try to include certain flags. And I'll get to that in just a second. But just like the flag at our events, these things matter to people who do not see themselves reflected in society in a positive light every day. Positive role models help us all, and you can be one whether you're Rainbow Family or an ally. But at every event we throw at CMH, it has a progress flag somewhere. As LGBT individuals ourselves, we as the events team feel it's vital that people know they are safe and around fellow Rainbow family. In this same respect, we also try to put up the lesser known or shown flags, such as the intersex flag, the agender flag, and the asexual flag. So if you'll notice, that might be a fun game at the events next time to try and find the ones that are lesser known and learn about them, because we always put them up. Yes, representation is crucial, Aaron. He says, I don't think many understand how much that means to someone who's feeling unseen. Yes, because when you have never seen yourself reflected in society back at you in a lot of ways, it can feel very invalidating. It can feel very much like you're a freak of nature, which I'll address in a little bit. So yes, absolutely. The aromantic flag, yes, Deb, that's another one that does not get enough representation. Absolutely. Many of us can recognize, and don't get me wrong, I'm so happy that we can. We can recognize the lesbian flag, the bisexual flag, we can recognize the rainbow flag. But what does the agender look like? What does the gender fluid flag look like? There are so many, and the colors mean so much. They all have meanings on a flag, like what Nick is wearing, what I'm wearing, what Aaron is wearing on our backs. They all of these colors have different meanings, which Aaron's topic, if I remember correctly, will tell you a little bit more about that. So, let's see. What have I not talked about? Let's go down my list. Yeah. So, any other things that anybody else has that they can do? And honestly, this really is just some of them. There are so many little things in life that you can do, just simply human compassion wise, that can change everything. All right. Okay. Well then, to wrap things up. Oh, go ahead, Talia. Avoid toxic positivity. Yes. Can we talk about that for a second? Toxic positivity is when we don't acknowledge that there is struggle or bad and we just go, we'll just think it positive. And yes, there's power in affirmations, but there's also sort of this bypassing that happens when we don't acknowledge the struggles. It also can alienate people. So that's a really good one, Talia. Thank you. Yes, it's the little issues. Absolutely. Wonderful one. Yes. Okay, so to wrap things up, inclusion is vital.
Can I just add something really quick?
Please do, Erin. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, because Talia said belittling issues, and it's also in a way like invalidating the way someone feels. Like simply just letting it go or just trying to skid over it, it makes a person feel invalidated, like what they're feeling shouldn't be. And that's extremely, I feel like, unfair to the person who's feeling those feelings. There's a reason why those feelings are there. So not that you can't be positive and look on the brighter things, but there should also be space for, space to allow yourself to feel what you're feeling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, true safe space is not a space that judges. Safe space and how to hold safe space for someone. I wrote a whole thing on this a while back because part of my job is that in real life. But part of safe space is holding a space of non-judgment. And if you are going, nope, we can't have that here because it's bad, like there is a judgment there. There's a value placed. To really feel seen, heard, we need to be able to be open to hearing this person from where they are and all that they are, right? So there is a level of that. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for saying that, Erin. I agree. Yes. So again, to wrap things up, inclusion is vital. We as humans need connection. It heals, it encourages growth. We learn about each other. And it lets us know that we are not alone in times that we might feel powerless and without hope. Wouldn't you want the same courtesy given to you? No one deserves to suffer because of how they were born. No one is a freak of nature. We are simply nature. I encourage you to put some thought into the areas of your life that you take action to include others. Often, when we feel excluded, we are also excluding ourselves as well. So there's that side. But that's a whole other speech, isn't it? Suffice to say, we are all human and deserving of love. Love one another, be compassionate, take the time, because it can make someone's world. You have that power. Thank you. All right. We've got more doors. We have
Thank
more
you,
doors,
Rhys.
guys. You're welcome. So, we have door number 1 and door number 2 left. Which one? Okay, again, first person to type it. Oh, Deb, door number 2. All right. Door number 2 is the bricks that built LGBT. That would be Aaron. Everyone, please be very encouraging. Aaron is nervous.
I
Aaron
heard
has
it.
this.
I heard it in your chuckle.
Yes.
Yes, I am nervous. I'm going to try to do my best. Rebella, thank you. Always so supportive. Okay, so the concept of, I want to make sure I'm not missing anything here. I thought I had it all set up.
I'll do a little song and dance. Welcome back, Dead.
Okay, so the concept of having love for someone of the same sex or gender is not new by any means. Give me 1 second. All right, there we go. Something happened with my mic. Sorry about that. The concept of having love for someone of the same sex or gender is not new by any means. The LGBTQ plus history dates back to the earliest recorded instances of same-sex love and sexuality across many ancient civilizations. In ancient Greece, we have the lyrical music and poetry of Sappho, who wrote and sang about her love and weakness of women. In ancient China and Taiwan, we have many writings of male leaders engaging in homosexual relationships. In many cultures, such as the Native American culture, the concept of being two-spirited, where an individual was considered neither man nor woman, were recorded and still exists in present day. It wasn't until the beginning of the 17th century where the term homosexuality came into light for the first time. And it was referred to as same-sex love, which I absolutely love. When I read that, I was super happy that it was phrased as same-sex love. The history and foundation of the LGBT community's social movements is not only complex, but it's rich and it is beautiful. It's unfortunate that many of the movements emerged as a response to centuries of persecution, be it by the church, by the state, or medical authorities. And in addition, homosexual activity was banned by law or tradition, and the community was faced with a lot of public trials, exiles, and warnings. But this created the need for change, and that is what made it beautiful. Activists from various backgrounds, they pushed their fear aside and came together equipped with knowledge and courage as armor to their beliefs. The 20th century brought on an overwhelming amount of recognition for the LGBTQ community through the use of scientific studies and sex research, as well as the demand for democracy and equality. The term LGBTQ itself evolved as the community did, which was a reflection of the changes that were slowly being made. So if you will, I'd love for everyone to join and we can explore a little bit more about that. Who here knows or is already familiar with some of the events that changed the LGBT community, both past or present? Yep, Stonewall is definitely one of the most known, I feel like. I do have some information in here about Stonewall. Anyone else? Or what about any maybe important names that come to mind when it comes to the LGBTQ movement? Oh, there's a screen. Oh, there's a screen right above. Okay, well, we'll go over some stuff. Um, is anyone else familiar with the Stonewall? Because we can, let me see, I can go over that and we can learn a little bit about it. Quentin Crisp and Flo King. Okay. Can you share a little snippet of what that is or who they are? Deb said in England, there's, I'm going to mess up these names, Quentin Crisp and Flo King. I'm not familiar with them. Okay, Quentin Crisp spoke at my university when I was young, and he wrote a book called The Naked Civil Servant. Quentin is my hero, lived a gay life when it was illegal in Britain. Okay, very nice.
Those are powerful, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing their names.
he was one of the stately homos of England. Okay. So a lot of the information that I have is centered in the US. So it's nice that I can, his joke, not mine. So it's good to get information from anyone else who's not in the US because that's just extra information, extra knowledge for everyone to have. So the Stonewall riot is also known as the Stonewall Inn uprising. These riots began on the morning of June 28, 1969 in New York City. New York City police raided the Stonewall Inn. The Stonewall Inn was a gay club located in Greenwich Village in New York City. It was documented that the police raided and roughly hauled both employees and patrons out of the bar for violating the state's gender-appropriate clothing statute. It was also said that the female officers were instructed to take suspicious persons to the bathroom to, as they put it, check their sex during this raid. Fed up with the constant police harassment and social discrimination, the raid sparked a riot among bar patrons and the neighborhood residents. The bar patrons and neighborhood residents with the police, and it was for 6 days long. There was a lot of protests between the LGBT community and the police. The Stonewall riot was a major event, and it was a vehicle that drove the gay rights movement into gear in the US and in many areas around the world. Let's see. Sorry, I was just reading Deb's edition, The Englishman in New York Instincts video. Okay. So with the Stonewall riot, what ended up happening is the first Pride Week was a result of this riot. And on June 28th of 1970, which was a year after, people of the LGBT community from across New York City gathered to commemorate the first anniversary of the gay liberation movement. It later became known as the Christopher Street Liberation Day, and that week became Gay Pride Week. So that's a pretty brief snippet of the Stonewall incident, the Stonewall riot, rather.
Mm-hmm. But there are many others.
There are many others.
Yes. What else you got?
Let's see. So one of the ones that I wanted to make sure that I had on here goes back way long ago, from 1924. It's called the Society for Human Rights. The Society for Human Rights, it was the first LGBT gay rights organization, and it is the oldest documented in America. It was created and led by Henry Gerber, and its mission was to promote tolerance and understanding of homosexuality. Unfortunately, the society wasn't able to complete their mission. Many of the members of the group, including Gerber himself, was arrested for what they called at the time obscenity charges, is what they said. And while the charges were dropped, it left him bankrupt and he lost his employment with the Postal Service. So while the society only lasted a year, it was recognized as the first homosexual rights organization in the U.S. and it was as a precursor to the modern gay movement. So I thought that was pretty neat that it went back as far as 1924. Let's see. Question: what state was the first state to decriminalize homosexuality? Anyone have an idea? While we're waiting for that, Dreamer says, I read an article about how San Francisco became the city of love over the years. I don't have the link handy, but it was a very interesting reading. Lots of gay people were dropped there. A lot of gay events started in San Francisco, actually. I believe the first gay parade was in San Francisco. Yes, Rhys, you are correct. Illinois. So Illinois becomes the first state to decriminalize homosexuality. It decriminalized sodomy and similar behavior among consenting adults in private. That's what the ruling was. And then let's see. Dreamer says there was a big concentration of gay people there because they were sent there.
Yeah, Dreamer was saying that they read an article about how San Francisco became the city of over the years. We don't have the link handy, but it was a very interesting read because a lot of them had been sent there over the years.
Yeah. So I'm looking for the, so with the Stonewall, the Christopher Street Liberation Day, and then that week became Gay Pride Week. And then what ended up happening is 2 years later across the states, the LGBT community celebrates Pride there as well. And that was in 1972. The first gay pride parade is held in San Francisco, California. The parade had 2,000 marchers, but it also had 15,000 spectators. So it was a pretty big crowd. Every parade that I've been to has always been very, very large. There's usually a big outcome. So let's see, we have I have a bunch of different things on here. So I'm kind of like looking through to see. So 1955, the daughters of, and I'm going to say this wrong, and I apologize, Bellisseria. It was the first lesbian rights group in the U.S. It was founded by Rosalie Ramberger and her partner Rosemary Slinen. But it was also run with President Del Martin and her partner Phyllis Lyon, Marcia Foster, and Noni Frey. And the group ran until 1970, but it lost its traction after a few years. They were met with a lot of hostility, and they were they were subjected to a lot of surveillance from like the local police, even the CIA and FBI. They were watched heavily. And so because of that, a lot of the group members kind of stepped back and didn't want to be involved. And so unfortunately, it kind of fizzled out. But I thought that was interesting because in 2015, Del Martin and her partner, Phyllis Lyon, were actually the first lesbian couple to get married in the States. And I think that was in 2004, I think. Yes, in 2004, Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon, the president and the secretary of the Daughters of Bellisseria, get married. So I thought that was sweet. It was 1955 when they started this group. And now in 2004, they were able to actually get married, which I thought was pretty sweet.
That is. Oh. Erin, can
Yes.
you talk about the one you mentioned to us the other day? Because we've been working on these speeches for a while, guys.
Which one is that?
Can you talk about the one with the 80s and the AIDS epidemic and stuff? I think that's a very interesting one that I
Yes.
would love to hear about.
Yes. So Deb mentioned.
You go on and find it, Erin. I'll field this. So Deb
Okay,
mentioned,
thank you. I appreciate it.
yep, no problem. Deb mentioned there was the sad bit that happened in Oslo, Norway. There was a shooting during Pride. They caught the guy, but there was an enormous outpouring of support for LGBTQ plus. That is, I agree, Nick. It's horrible, but also I'm glad that there was support that was outpoured. I'm sad that it took that to find it. You know, that happens so often. But yeah, I'm glad that there was an outpouring of support.
Yeah.
That's very
So-
heartwarming.
I did find the one that you were referring to.
Oh,
Rhys.
yes.
So it's a group called ACT UP, and it's also known as the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. They actually filed and fought through a lawsuit with Northwest Orient Airlines. The airlines actually refused to allow individuals, mostly suspected gay men, to board a flight due to the AIDS epidemic. So I don't know if you guys are familiar, but in the 80s, the AIDS epidemic was big, and it was big amongst the gay community, and specifically Black gay men. And so they received a lot of the heavier lash of it, like the backlash of it. So they were denied to board flights. So they did this entire lawsuit. It was unfortunate that this was a time where discrimination was the strongest against gay Black men. But and then also in 1991, the same group, they also ensued in what they called the Day of Desperation, where because they were so fed up with the AIDS-related discrimination, the group delivered coffins to various federal offices in New York City in protest. So it was just like it was unexpected. They didn't know what to do with it, but all of these offices received many, many empty coffins, and it was to make a statement. And then later that year, Gladstone they created the Institute of Virology and Immunology, which is they call it GIVI, to help address the rising of the HIV and AIDS crisis. So something positive did come out of it, but there was so much discrimination amongst the gay population, the Black gay men population, because of it.
And I would say still to this day, there is a bit of a stigma around
yes.
that for sure. So that's very sad. I mean, I love the name Givey. That's clever.
Yes, I liked it too. Exactly, Riz, like you were saying, and needless to say, sharing an airplane cabin is not how you get it. It just it shows how lack of education and lack of just knowledge, and yes, exactly, Rebella, stigma. Yeah. So let's see. I know Riz mentioned earlier about flags.
Yes.
Um, I don't have a whole lot, but I do have the rainbow flag. Let's see. So does anyone know what the colors represent on the flag or who created the flag? Welcome in everyone who I haven't been able to see. Okay, so the original creator of the rainbow flag, his name was Gilbert Baker, and the colors were chosen to represent life more than anything. So the colors are aimed for just like very happy things. So the hot pink is for sexuality, red is for life, orange is healing, yellow is sun, green is nature, turquoise is art, indigo is harmony, and violet was spirit. I thought that was pretty neat because it didn't focus on like sex or sexuality or gender or anything like that. It was meant to just represent life, to represent a person in general, not so much anything specific to sex, sexuality. Yes, exactly. So I thought
It's
that was pretty neat.
it's very sort of I can see the importance of having the individual flags so everyone feels represented. I also see the importance of having Baker's flag, where it's like, yes, but also we are unified by these things too.
Mhm. Deb said it's happy.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, it's how far we've come as well.
So I know that Riz also touched on mental health with the isolation and such. Um, and I think it's important to point out a few facts in regards to mental health. For a long time, homosexuality was considered an illness and or a mental disorder, and that was a big portion of the stigma. And so there's some key things that happened over the years that were very, very big in the changes. Um, does anyone know the year where it no longer was considered a mental health disorder? Not the 1950s, Nick.
Good guesses though.
Yeah, yeah, pretty close. It was in 1987. The disorder is removed entirely from the DSM revision. So in 1987, and it's very, very recent. Like when you think about it, it's recent. Um, so in 1987, the disorder is removed entirely from the DSM, which is the book that clinicians use to diagnose. However, in this edition, the controversial classification of gender identity disorder appeared as a label for transgender people for the first time. So it was no longer considered a mental illness, but then it took on the gender identity disorder, which was the first time that it was seen for the transgender population. Um, in 1991, I know somebody put 1992 here. Ellesian. I'm sorry if I butcher your name. In 1991, the WHO, which is the World Health Organization, it removed homosexuality as a diagnosis in the ICD. Now, the ICD is it's the book that medical professionals use to diagnose. It's the International Classification of Diseases. So it was no longer seen as a disease. So those were two major things that I feel were important to include, because that was heavy. It was heavy to, like, how can it not be heavy to be seen as a mental disorder or as having an illness?
Yeah. Well, and that was so set that way for so long.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just as simple as like, oh, the ban is lifted. It's sort of ingrained in a lot of how we interact with each other, even subliminally. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's huge. Yes, exactly, Deb. Still affects.
It does still affect, and I think it still affects as well because there's still that stigma, and in some cultures, in some generations, like the older generation, they still hold on to that.
Mm-hmm.
That it's it's a sickness. It's a disorder, a mental health disorder. Like, some people still have that mindset.
For much of their life, that was the mode.
Exactly.
And then you tell them otherwise, and unless you are, I would think in that profession,
Mm-hmm.
you really don't. A lot of people wouldn't know or wouldn't look it up to change that, or or just wouldn't readily accept it.
Like, I'm thinking 1987 and 1991. In 87, I'm putting my age out there. I was 4 years old. So it's like, it was so recent. So I could, I get it. For so long, this is the way this is what they knew.
Yes.
And so they still have that mindset.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you have to think about this. Anything like that through generations, it takes generations to kind of find a new way to be as well.
Yes.
So the further we go, and I'm sure you'll get into this, Aaron, so I'm not trying to step on your toes, but like the further we go, the more we will learn how to deal with those things and alternative methods, and like that it isn't necessarily a problem that needs to be fixed. It is more so a platform that needs to be, again, inclusive.
Yes, absolutely. I can understand that, Deb. Deb said that's why I'm still kind of closeted, born in 62. I can understand that. I can see that.
What else do you have for us, Aaron?
Let's see. I'm trying to flip around and let's see. So the transgender community began to see changes beginning around 1999 and 2000. Gwendolyn Ann Smith, she created the first Transgender Day of Remembrance, and it was commemorating all the trans people who were killed by anti-transgender violence and bigotry. And I thought that was important to put here, because we're still seeing that even today. So I thought it was super important. In 2004, in 2004, we saw the first trans march take place. And in 2013, the APA, the American Psychological Association, updates trans classification. So the classification changed from gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria, which is a big improvement, a big step. And then also 3 years later, the UCSF releases guidelines for trans healthcare. So we saw a lot of changes within the healthcare, and I think that involved like the exploration of the hormone therapy, or just healthcare in general, because it was very difficult for anyone who is transgender to be seen by anybody in the healthcare field, a physician, in the hospitals. It was difficult. So they created guidelines for healthcare for transgender individuals. So I thought that was majorly important as well.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah.
We have in 2001, Netherlands becomes the first country to legalize gay marriage.
Yay, Netherlands!
And then does anyone know when the US legalized gay marriage? We were way behind. Everyone was ahead of us.
I know that it was the 2000s. I want to say early 2000s.
2015.
Oh, all right.
And yes, you're right. Can I say Ellie? Eli? Is that okay? I just don't want to keep butchering the name. But yes, okay, Ellie, that's fine. So yes, it was legalized in 2015, but then there was some court decisions, and I believe it was kind of revoked. It was like a back and forth thing, so I'm not 100% sure where it fully stands. But I think it's a state by state thing. I believe it's kind of been back and forth. I remember in 2015 when it came to light that yes, it was legal in the United States, because I was super excited. I was so happy for it. But then I know after I think a year or two, it was kind of back and forth.
Yeah.
Yes, different states have different rules.
I also know that a lot of heterosexual couples waited in solidarity to marry
Yes.
until gay couples were able to marry, which
Yep.
they did not have to do, and was a very sweet and wonderful example of inclusivity.
Mm. We have the. Well, let me ask you, what is the don't ask, don't tell?
Oh, that's a military policy.
Yes, it is. Yep. So it's still okay. So it was a policy that it banned gay, lesbian, and bisexual service members from disclosing their sexual identity. And it was in effect for so many years, like 17 years. And if they knew, they had reason to kick you out of the military. And that was up until 2011 when it was banned. So it's no longer in effect, but there's still heavy stigma in the military about the LGBT community. So it's legally banned, but there's still a lot of the same like mindset. But I would assume that it'd be so freeing to be able to not have to hide it, or not have the legal repercussions if you happen to disclose it, I should say. Okay, so at least that's technically a banned any service member, gay or straight, from discussing gender orientation. Don't kiss your partner in front of your commander. Yeah, very heavy in the military, very heavy. So it's funny, when I was putting this together, I saw how divided things were, back and forth, where some people were for, so many were against. Like in 2017, the trans community experienced a victory and a setback, which amuses me. But there was the reversal of the trans protection, which ruled to include transgender people as a protected minority group under the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And that left the transgender people very vulnerable to employment discrimination. But then also in that year, there was the first openly U.S. state representative elected. So you kind of see a pro and a con all within the same year. And then also, like, to further prove that, like, the division of people, in 2020, we had the decision that was brought by the Supreme Court to expand the protection for the LGBTQ employees, only to follow with, and this is the most recent, or like the most recent that I found, the Don't Say Gay bill, which happened 2 years later in 2022, where there's repercussions for saying the word gay in schools and such. So you see a lot of back and forth, and you see it's like the constant, like, one step forward, two step back, but there's always a constant forward movement, which I think is really, really important to focus on.
And now that you've put the Paula Abdul song in our heads.
So that's a lot of what I have. Yeah, a lot of, like, oh, one thing that I want to add, which I thought was important. Very much like you, Rhys, I have a list.
A list of all the things. Yes. Oh, while Erin is finding that, anybody else got anything? Anything they've thought of as we're talking about all of this? All right. So, who wants something rather bad? That the inclusion of homosexuality in the DSM, when that was done, yes. Was actually something that saved lives. Because before that, it was looked on as strictly a moral degeneracy. Right. Yes. That is very true. Yes. I mean, and that's another example. Oh, and was controversial. Yes, absolutely. That's another example of maybe do things. And yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Yes, it was a small step in the way. It was good. It was good for what it was. It helped. And then eventually needed to be changed again whenever it was changed. So it was good. It did what it needed to do for the time, absolutely.
Yeah.
And also for the DSM criteria for gender identity disorder, when it switched to gender dysphoria, that was also kind of a steps forward, steps back thing, but it also allowed a lot of people to actually start receiving trans health care,
Yes.
even though it's kind of connected with this DSM criteria.
Absolutely.
And trans healthcare is extremely important because many may not realize that things like hormones and estrogen, testosterone, like they can be lifesavers if you're one, just on a mental space, but also if you are reliant on that, not having it can be extremely dangerous. So it's very important that happened. Yeah.
So the one last thing I was wanting to point out has not anything to do with this topic, but it was adding the Q to the LGBT, and that happened in 2016.
Yes.
So the Q, which represents queer, was added to LGBT, and for me personally, that's that put me in a happy place because the word queer was looked down upon for so long, and to me, queer is not anything negative. To me, queer means beautifully different. Doesn't matter what your different is, you're beautifully different. So it was, yes, exactly, Roxy. It was like a take back. It was like taking back the ownership, um, of that word, the beauty of that word. So in 2016, it was added, and LGBT was now LGBTQ. So that was something I really put in there. I wanted to put in there because it was like a happy moment for me. hmm But overall, and to wrap up this portion, as I previously mentioned, the path to progression within the LGBTQ community, it's rich and it's beautiful. It's truly a testament to resilience and the pursuit of equality. And while we're not quite where we should be or where most of us would want to be, it doesn't discredit that over the years, this vibrant community has made remarkable strides. Strides towards stepping out of the shadows and making the world see that we're here and that we deserve to be here. So I hope that we continue pushing forward. And that goes a lot with what Riz was saying, the advocacy and inclusivity and all that stuff and everything in that section with everyone including us.
Okay. Thank you, Aaron. So we've got one door left. I'm not gonna let you guys pick a number because there's one number. So the last one is defining our diversity, which is Nick's topic, and then we'll have a kitchen table sit down. The
Right.
metaphorical kitchen table. So take it away, Nick.
All right, hello again. I am coming to you today with a glossary of terms built by a greater hope. We're going to start off first talking about sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. Now, it's important to know that all of these things are completely different, but they all work together. Does anyone know how sexual orientation is different than gender identity?
Oh, this is a good question. Got a few people typing.
Yeah.
So Roxy says gender is how you identify who you are personally, as in man, woman, trans, or other.
That's true. Yes.
Okay.
It's our inner sense of self-belonging to gender groups, and that may be different than what we are assigned at birth, and our gender expression. And our sexual orientation will refer to that romantic or emotional and/or not sexual physical attraction to others, men, women, both, neither, and those that are gender nonconforming.
Mm-hmm. Natalia says sexual is who you are attracted to.
That's right.
And Deb also says gender identity is how you identify. Sexuality is who you love.
Right. So then we got our basic knowledge of that. So we probably already know if a person is heterosexual or homosexual, we know what they are. Heterosexual being attracted to the opposite sex or considered, quote, straight, and homosexual, a person attracted to the same sex, as Aaron so greatly put. that together, history of homosexuality for us. But I do want to go on to another term, heteronormativity. Does anybody know what heteronormativity is?
Got some folks typing. I love to see the little chat bubbles pop up.
Yes, that could be true, Italy.
So Ellie says the pressure to be heterosexual. Deb
Yeah,
says,
that's exactly right, Dave. The assumption that heterosexuality is the norm. That is perfect. So then that will lead us into another term called compulsory heterosexuality. It is the theory that heterosexuality is assumed and forced upon people, especially women, by our patriarchal and heteronormative society. Due to these societal norms, many LGBTQ plus persons do not discover their sexuality and identity until late in life, if at all, because it is sometimes some people never get to come out. So then we know what LGBTQIA will mean. So we've talked a little about heterosexuality and homosexuality. We get the alphabet. Some people call it the alphabet soup, but it's actually a great way of including everybody in an acronym. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual.
and then a plus sign.
And the plus sign too,
Everything else we didn't get.
We also have all the other people we didn't cover, plus two spirit.
Yeah, sometimes you'll see a 2 and an S, and that's what that stands for. Yeah.
So we know what gay means. We know what bisexual means. Do we know what transgender means? Because it's different than being lesbian or gay. We're sliding over to identity rather than a sexual orientation.
I like that Deb said 2 hearts.
Those are queer and questioning. We went over queer a little bit. I mentioned that my father, born in the 1950s in the USA of America, still to this day thinks that queer is a bad word and doesn't know how I would want to relate to a word such as that. But as a couple of people had said, we've reclaimed that word, and it's something that we can use for ourselves now. We also have intersex, which is a term that is usually left off lists. Oh, I lost my page here. Intersex, it's an umbrella term to describe bodies that fall outside the strict male-female binary. This is naturally occurring variation in humans and is not a medical problem to be addressed early by a doctor. A lot of intersex individuals are that doctor I can't find the word intervention. Some children find themselves intervened by a doctor early in life, which does cause a host of problems to the individual as they grow, because being intersex is not like being trans, but being intersex is also included in the LGBTQIA+.
Hey, Nick.
Yes.
Could you go over the meaning of trans again? I think we accidentally half skipped it.
Cisgender and transgender. So cisgender is when a person's gender identity and sex assigned at their birth are congruent and are the same. To be transgender, It's an umbrella term to refer to people who are not cisgender and instead do not identify as the same gender as their sex assigned at birth. Um, Also, sex assigned at birth is something a doctor does. Same thing they did with intersex. It's all to the doctors, apparently. So then, if you were a trans woman, you refer to a woman who was assigned male at birth. Trans man refers to a man who was assigned female at birth. But a lot of people, including myself, we just would rather be called men or women. Actually. And I did want to touch about a little bit about gender dysphoria. We did talk about it being replaced in the DSM, but gender dysphoria, it's a clinically significant distress and sense of unease that may lead to increased levels of depression and anxiety that have a harmful impact on daily life. This distress is caused by a person's gender identity not matching how they feel within. This often occurs when a trans person is forced to match their gender identity and expression to their assigned sex at birth. Cisgender people can also experience gender dysphoria when dressing as the opposite sex. Okay, right. Assigned female at birth, assigned male at birth. Transitioning. Does anybody know what it means to transition? Yes, the process by which a person strives to more closely align their outwardly expression of gender with their true gender identity. This can happen in many different ways and in differing stages throughout one's life. Some people choose not to transition, and that is valid as well. Which leads us to coming out. Now, I'm just going to define coming out as telling friends and family the truth about who you are, whether that's transgender or aromantic or demisexual. But how can we support someone who is coming out? How can we support someone early on in that transition?
Hint, hint. I talked a lot about this earlier.
Listen to them, yes. Accept their choices, yes. Exactly, Dreamer. Use their new name, not the old name. We call that a dead name. So in my experience in a professional situation, when I came out at work, I tried buttons, I tried badges, I tried name tags, I tried everything to tell the world outwardly what I was. But that still will not stop someone from using your dead name, even though they clearly see it in front of them that that's not what you want to be called. So that's obviously not a way to support someone early on in their transition. So if you see someone at work or school or in your peer group, they might start wearing buttons or badges, stamps, things like that. Might have been a he, him, but now they want to be called she, her. Or they were she, her, and they want to be called he, him. They also have they, them, and then a myriad of neo-pronouns. Personally, my pronouns are Z, them, ziz, XIS, XIM. And that's pronounced with Z. See, Dreamer says, I have gay and trans students, but even if I didn't, the first thing I would always do when I read is ask how they want to be called. That's very awesome.
Yeah, Dreamer, I want to take a minute because that is something that would be very inclusive. That is something that, as someone coming in, even if maybe I hadn't had alternative pronouns to what people would expect seeing me, I would still feel very safe there, right? Just because you asked everyone what that would be. So yeah, and also if you're ever curious, a lot of things that I've been told is to ask someone to the side where it's just you and them, because some people may not want those known, or they may only want it used in private as well, not like overall.
Yeah. Another way you can tell is they'll start dressing differently, grooming themselves differently. Some trans men might start having a mustache, or your friends might start developing other ways. Some folks might wear wigs and makeup. It's just all of these are the tools to help the trans person become the person that they truly believe they are. And with the more support that we have from our community, the better we are at not becoming that 46% that we were talking about earlier. Because unless we are supported in the early times of coming out, we're all going to go through hell. And then it's going to be 10 years later, and then all we can remember is the hell that we went through. But I will say that not all transgender people will transition. Many will transition in some areas and not others, such as name and appearance, but they may not be interested in surgeries. Also, many people cannot afford the cost of medically transitioning. Also, in the United States of America, not all trans people have the luxury of starting hormones. Different states have different rules about who can medically transition. But really, those who transition are no more or less real than any other person. So transition, there is no start point, there is no stop point, and it is not linear, and it is not the same for every trans person at all. Now that we've talked about trans and cisgender, talk about the other branches of gender identity. So I would think that we know what non-binary means. All three of us up here are non-binary. What non-binary refers to a person whose gender identity does not comfortably fit the gender binary. Right, not linear at all.
Okay, so Roxy said, so I'm intersex and pretty andro, no desire to be one or the other, but happy to be in the middle between the two would make me cisgender as someone intersex, or is that non-binary? So it's a question that Roxy has.
I think that would just have to depend on how the person felt.
I would also say it would be how you viewed it. Do you view gender as a spectrum, or do you view it as a binary, meaning there is male and female?
Right.
Or is there sort of a progression between the two?
We have a couple of terms here. We have genderqueer, agender, bigender, gender fluid, and two-spirit. And all of these might sound the same, but they're actually different. Genderqueer will refer to a person whose gender identity falls outside the cisgender normative. The heteronormative narrative that I was agender, agender, refers to people identified by not having a gender or are gender neutral. Bigender will refer to people who experience exactly two genders alternately or simultaneously. Gender fluid will refer to a person whose gender changes and shifts over time. And here in America, with the indigenous tribes, we have a term called two-spirit. That's used to describe people from a cultural perspective who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans, or intersex. It is used to capture a concept that exists in many different indigenous cultures and languages. For some, the term two-spirit describes the societal and spiritual role that people played within traditional societies, such as mediators, keepers of certain ceremonies, transcending accepted roles of men and women, and filling a role as an established middle gender.
So Talia said, is there a default set of pronouns? I've kind of taken to just using they, them, or just end up talking slow as I do the gymnastics to avoid using anything I shouldn't until I have a chance to find out. I completely understand the gymnastics to avoid. So what I would say, and I tell this to a lot of people, if you don't know, they them is my default, because unless someone tells me something different, I don't know. Or the more you get into conversation, you'll pick that up. So if you're in a group that you know specifically is queer in some way, my default is they, them. In my group real life, if I just meet someone, I always use they, them, because I don't know. I don't know who they are. I don't know how they identify. I don't know what they prefer. And sometimes it's a little awkward if you just meet someone and you're like, hey, what do you prefer to be called? So I usually just go with a they, them. And I've never come across someone who has been offended by that.
I can actually speak a bit on this too. So I have a family member that does not prefer they, but still would rather be called that than called what might be assumed in a heteronormative sense. So even when it is not the answer, it's still acknowledging that that person could be outside of it, and I think most people appreciate that. But I do also agree with what Ellie said, which is, if in doubt, just use their name. Use their name.
Yeah. Use their name. I had to back up a little bit, back to coming out at work and pronouns and gender. There's also the infamous bathroom issue. So, if you're trans and you're coming out at work, usually you have one or two restrooms. And for myself, coming out in a professional atmosphere, the bathroom issue was quite an issue. We did not have a gender-neutral restroom, and they had converted one of the men's restrooms into a kind of somewhat gender-neutral restroom, but all the men still used it. So it was kind of just still the men's room. But that's also another bit, supporting people who are transitioning early. Maybe they need a bathroom buddy. You know, that's never bad. Yeah, I just didn't want to forget the bathrooms, because as well as names, also email signatures. If you're in a work relationship and someone's coming out, that might be the first step that they go to come out, is in their email signature. because that is one of the most subtle ways of doing it. So check those email signatures of your friends, your cohorts, your coworkers. If they're signing off with a new name and a new pronoun, keep that in mind. Also, captions. If someone is captioning a photo on Facebook or something, they might add something about their pronouns or what they want to be called. So just talk to them. Let them let you know what they want to be called and respect that. Because without the respect, we're just going to be the 46% and very unhappy. But I think that's all the definitions that I have. Does anybody have any questions about any of the words that we mentioned, or want any
And do remember,
clarification?
we have kitchen table conversation coming up next as well.
Yes, we do. We do. Potty partner, exactly. Because sometimes it's not safe to go to the bathroom. Someone finds the term assigned gender problematic.
Yeah. Well, and that's essentially how it works, is because the doctors are the ones that assign it in that moment. So it is someone with a literal clipboard writing down what they've decided you are.
Yes. So technically,
Yes.
that's what that term means. At birth, this is what the doctor saw. This is what the doctor assigned. So that literally is what it is.
Yeah.
And it does sound like the person with a clipboard, like check, next, here we go, next.
Yes.
Oh, I bet it has, Ellie.
Yes. It most definitely has.
So Ellie, for people listening in, Ellie says, yes, as to the bathroom issue, this has become a legal issue for us in Florida and an employment issue. Yes, in a lot of places right now, it is an issue.
That's why I said bathroom buddies are a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's horrible, to be fired for not reporting your gender. I mean, not to mention it doesn't feel good, but in a real sense, to have to hold your restroom, I don't know, what is a shift? 6 hours, 8 hours?
8 hours.
To have to hold yourself for an 8-hour shift because there's no safety in the restrooms. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And to be forced to go into another bathroom, which you may not even look like you belong into that bathroom either. That's why we really need gender neutral bathrooms, so we can go and have safety. So we don't have to pick a bathroom.
Not only that, but I never understood, because gender neutral bathrooms, having a family bathroom, we already have family bathrooms. So why wouldn't a gender neutral bathroom be very similar? I mean, we already have like this hodgepodge for a reason. But that's my whole other side note soapbox.
Yeah.
The bathroom issue can be an entire topic on its own.
Yes. It certainly can.
And I have gotten into heated debate with my own family about it at times, so I'm sure many of us have.
All right, shall we kitchen table?
Yeah. All right. So with that said, you guys know what's behind all of the doors, right? This is the strangest, what is it, Wheel of Fortune game ever, or The Price is Right. What's behind that door? So now we get to the kitchen table portion. So the kitchen table portion is exactly what it sounds like. Essentially, just envision we're all sitting at a kitchen table with a cup of tea or coffee, whatever you prefer. If you don't like that, then just have some water, whatever. And we're all having a conversation about all the things that we've just learned. Yes, a piece of pie. We got donuts. We got cheesecake. We can go full Golden Girl if you want. But yes, so we're sitting together and we're having a conversation because this was a lot of different information. It was a lot of different thoughts. We now want to know what you're thinking. What as you were listening to all of this, stuck out for you the most? What was something you feel like maybe you could improve? What was something that you feel like you're proud that you're already doing? What was something that was shocking, perhaps, that you didn't know? We want to hear from you guys and talk with you now. But, also have some pie.
I'm going for the cheesecake.
The cheesecake is delicious. Yes, please do that. Ooh, toast. All right. Yes, you just say things in chat. Just, type in whatever you would like. We want to hear from you guys in chat.
Also, if you're comfortable with voice or preferred voice, you can do voice as well. That's an option, but it's not necessary. I just wanted to throw it out there.
Yes, and we are being recorded on live stream, just to let you know. All right. Ellie says, for academics and teaching professionals working in the state of Florida has become like being on the front lines, of this battle. Yeah. So vote, Ellie says. Vote, vote, vote.
I can only imagine what that feels like.
Yeah.
Not being able to say things. In my part, I mentioned the Don't Say Gay bill that passed in 2022. And I can't imagine not being supportive to your students, being supportive to fellow staff. I can't imagine going into work and not being able to be who you truly are.
Mm-hmm.
So I can imagine that it would feel like being on the front lines and having to face a battle every day.
Or not being able to encourage others to be who they truly are as well.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Deb says, you validated my feelings about myself. I am scarred from cancer, I believe they meant. And when I look at myself, I see two bodies, a male and a female, and I lost the desire for sex. Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons that I talked about the gray asexual earlier is because that is something that just doesn't get talked about. Gray specifically, but also asexual just in general. There's a lot involved in that, and there's a lot of feelings with that. There's a lot of guilt of like, why am I different? Why don't I feel this? There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of feelings of, am I broken? But we're not. We just are how we are. And that's valid.
We definitely are not broken.
No.
You are most welcome, Deb. I'm glad you were here to be a part of this. It's funny, growing up, I never saw male and female. I never saw boy or girl. I saw masculine or feminine. I saw girly or boyish, if that makes sense. And for a kid, that's very confusing because you're taught boy or girl. But the idea of boy and girl just never really connected with me ever.
Yeah. Deb, I also was a tomboy that was put in a dress, and I had a whole thing about it. Trust me. I think my non-binary and my gender fluid stems from actually gender fluid in itself, right? That's kind of, I fluctuate up and down on where I choose to express myself and how I feel that day in terms of gender.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is actually directly linked from the fact that as a child, I was dressed in ultra feminine, like Sunday.
It's funny because a lot of people, when I explain masculine and feminine energies, they're like, "What do you mean energies?" And I'm like, "It really is just
A
the
vibe.
the vibe that I feel that day." And some days, I I am full out more mask, and
Yes.
I look like a boy, like what you would consider a boy. And then other times I'm super feminine and my makeup is done and my nails are done. And then there's days where I'm wearing basketball shorts, the biggest t-shirt, and my nails are manicured and I have red lips on. So
Yes.
it really is just it really is just an energy that I feel. It's never a matter of am I a boy or am I a girl? No, it's just the feelings, the vibes of the type of energy that I'm feeling today.
Agreed.
And it kind of just,
I know Aaron and I have had conversations too about how, like, we'll be getting dressed for our Avies here in SL, and we'll get frustrated because we can't decide what that vibe is or what that feeling is. But yeah, absolutely. And that, I think that gender expression was where I was first, which Nick talked a little bit about gender expression. Um, Before I realized that I was non-binary, I chose to use gender expression as a way to voice my preferences after many years of being dressed a very specific way. It was my sort of way of rebelling and way of figuring out who I was and how I felt. And then from that, I figured out, oh, I'm non binary and gender fluid. That makes a lot more sense now, guys.
so Ellie had said, I have an aunt who was considered mannish. She raised and showed horses and and had a farm manager who was female and they got married just a few years ago.
That's awesome.
Nice.
That's wonderful. Oh,
And yes, Dreamer, everything can be unisex if you wanted to.
absolutely.
It all it all depends on the bodies that you wear. But that's my own gripe. That's my own grief with SL.
I think, yeah, I think that unisex, it does. It depends on what you, like Aaron was talking about the energies, it depends on what you see as masculine and you see as feminine. I think there will be a lot of overlap in general because of heteronormativity coming into effect. But I think that there is certainly people and there are certain points where it's just kind of all just pretty paintings, if you will. And it just depends what kind of painting you want to make. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. I think to also add that expression can also be based on safety and the safety of where you are. Like, it might not be as safe for me to dress as flamboyant as I would like to, so sometimes I just want to skate under the radar and just be a traditional masculine or a traditional, well, I'm not feminine, but I I skate by being traditionally masculine, which is my go-to,
That's
and which
actually
can be a lot of people's that having a preference in being masculine, feminine can definitely be a preference too. That's all I wanted to say.
I was just going to say that reminds me, Nick and I got to meet in real life and we were walking down the street together, and I, in real life, present more feminine just because of my body. And so even if I'm dressing in what I would consider more masculine, I still look fairly femme. and Nick presents more as masculine. And so we were talking about how the fact that we are quite queer walking down the road holding hands, but anybody looking at us, we would look heterosexual. So that's just something to take into factors as well. You can't tell by looking at someone. You really can't. And that actually is part of one of my things I want to bring to the table. I would say my biggest one that I want people to know is about pansexuality. Pansexuality, which was defined already, is when the person that you love, it really doesn't have to do with gender. It doesn't have to do with what they're working with, if you will. It doesn't have to do with any of that. It basically is just you love who you love, and you are an equal opportunist, basically. I like to joke and say, because of my gray sexuality, I am an equal opportunist, but also a really hard interview. And so what I want to say about that is, before now, I was married to a cis male, and I was pansexual beforehand, and I was pansexual while I was married to that cis male, meaning I still had attraction for anyone. Just because I married a cis male didn't mean that I was not pansexual. And a lot of times in my life, there has been that assumption. Again, Nick presents masculine. I am in a relationship with Nick now. There could be an assumption from someone looking at us that we are heterosexual. But we're actually both non-binary. And so, that's not really the same, is it? Nick is queer. I'm queer. So again, this is just an example of just because something looks one way, don't make assumptions and don't say, oh, well, when you were pansexual or when you were bisexual. No, we don't choose to be one or the other. It's not a team situation. We just love who we love, and that doesn't mean that we are incapable of loving others, no matter who or what or how they are. So that's something I just wanted to put in for my own personal experiences. I've often had to deal with that. And so please just consider that when talking about other people.
I remember I'm often asked the question of, well, what do you like? And I'm like, what do you mean, what do I like? And I explained to them, I'm pansexual and what that means. And they're like, right, but what do you like or what do you prefer? And I'm baffled half the time.
I would like to test to sample all of the ice cream flavors. Thank you. And then I will let you know which one I
Right? And so I'm just like, but we just had this entire conversation. I just explained all of this, and so I've come to the conclusion that I just tell people I like what I like.
Yes.
And that's where I leave it as. I like what I like, because there is no specific. I don't look at a person and immediately I'm thinking about the fine details, so to speak. For me, it's a matter of, do I connect with this person? Does this person make me happy? And do they make my heart smile? And do I feel safe? And as long as I tick off all of those boxes, everything else is just bonus for me. But it doesn't matter. There's no specific way that I go first.
Yeah. So we have about 6 minutes left, I'm seeing on the clock. I know Aaron has one specific thing that he would like to share still, yes? And then we wrap up.
I'm sorry, remind me of what that was?
The situation that happened to you recently.
Oh, yes. So I was at the dog park. Every Saturday I take my big boy to the park, and I was with my partner, and something happened amongst the dogs. I don't know what happened specifically. To me, it looked like they were play fighting. There was no full aggression, but there was growling and rolling around. And one of the owners, I guess, got worried, took the dog, left, said something to the other person, and the other person became very irate. The person who took his dog and left, or I should say took their dog and left, just based on appearance, looked part of the queer community, so to say. You know, just on first glance and mannerisms and everything else, just the way they presented. And so this other person took it upon himself to use that to belittle him. And I won't say the words that they said, but was yelling and cursing and called him the F word and the N word and the every word that you can possibly think of, even as this person left with his dog. Yes. And continued to taunt them along the way as they left. And the words that he was saying, you can ask Rhys and Nick. I was, as a bystander, it wasn't even directed towards me, but as a bystander, led me to tears. Because it was so ugly, like the words that this person chose to use were so ugly. And being part of the LGBTQ community, it hurt me. It hurt me a lot. So what I wanted to bring to the table was making sure to be mindful of the words that you decide to use, because they are hurtful. Using slurs specific to the LGBTQ community, like, it's just extremely hurtful. And you never know, going back to that 46%, you never know where this person is. You never know what type of support this person has. You never know.
You also never know who's bystanding, who's standing by in that same exact position.
Correct. Because I am thankful that I have support in every way. I have support on SL. My partner is also pansexual, completely accepts that I'm non-binary. I have support from him like 1,000%. I know that I am loved, that I am cared for. But even as a bystander, I felt hurt and I felt ugly. So I can only imagine what that person felt as they walked away. Yeah. And you just never know. Huh. So that was something that I wanted to bring to the table, because the type of language that you use towards someone is extremely important.
Yes. So not using dead names, not yelling things like that in public, certainly not saying them in general, but definitely not in public where you're just, anyone can overhear. You know, a lot of my statistics were about young people, but there's also older people, you know, our age, older, that are still in a very bad place, and screaming those things is just completely inappropriate and unneeded.
It's very triggering.
And it was why I was very happy after hearing about that to write the blurb on inclusivity as well.
Talia, Rhys, Talia had asked, she said, sorry if I missed it, what is 46%? I am UK, so maybe not getting it.
I will read that to you really quick. So I read facts earlier on social isolation and the impact it has on the LGBTQ. And it says 39% of LGBTQIA youth seriously considered unaliving themselves this past year, including a whopping 46 of that being transgender and non-binary people. 46. So that's what we were speaking about. Now, I do see that it's 3 o'clock and we have virtual ability coming up next. So I do believe we have to switch that over. Yes. So with that said, there is an LGBT meeting at CMH, we have a host of that. As we said, we are already some of the staff there who are LGBT, and we would love for you guys to come visit us if you are already members. If you are not members, we have a booth over at the expo section. Please check us out. Please come join us. There's lots of freebies and flags and such. This place has changed our lives for the better, and we work very hard to do these events. And we were happy to speak today for all of you. So, with that said, thank you very much for listening and being here and interacting with us.
Yes, thank you. And if you have any questions, feel free to message. Do you know what I mean? Never feel like you can't message and ask a question or reach out, or like Rhys said, come to the sim. Sometimes there's people there. You can always chat in the group chat, ask questions, all that kind of stuff.
All right. We're gonna kick our butts off stage and make way for virtual ability now. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm ready to start. Hi, I'm Jenna Heron, and this is the presentation on health and wellness issues of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered persons. And this will be in text and voice. I want to say hello to everybody, and I, of course, want to thank Rebella for inviting me to speak here today. I'm going to begin this presentation with my standard disclaimer. I seem to do this disclaimer a lot. I am not a medical professional, nor do I have any personal lived experience with the topic for this session. The information I'm going to provide is a summary of research that I've read, and as such, it will not apply to everyone because we're all individuals. We all have our own unique characteristics and experiences. Sometimes what I will be speaking about applies to every human being, sometimes only to specific subgroups, and I'm going to try and make it clear which is which. I'm also very eager to point out that there definitely is inadequate research, to say the least, on many of these topics. And also, I'm far less familiar with situations and resources outside the US than I am about those in the US. And I'm going to ask you to share your thoughts about some of these topics as we get going in this session. So please put your responses in text. I have hearing loss, and I often don't understand when someone is speaking. I've put together a rather long list of references on a note card in the giver box that's up here to my right, your left. And I encourage you to click the box to get that list for future reference. So now let's get started. Our previous speakers spoke about depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues. LGBTQ individuals have significantly higher rates of depression compared to the straight population. And this graph shows the percentages of each group, according to the research I read, who are diagnosed with depression. Bisexual people, 40.1%. Lesbian or gay people, 35.2%. About a third of them have depression. Queer or questioning, 24.1%, and straight, 18.9%. Still 1 out of 5. That's still a high level of depression. Depression and anxiety are generally worse for people who are unable to express their gender identity. And that includes, of course, many teens and young adults, and I'm sure that's understandable. Another group at high risk for depression is people who lack adequate social support. It makes sense that LGBTQ persons of color, including Hispanics, those who suffered childhood abuse, and those experiencing psychological intimate partner violence are significantly more at risk for depression. So here's 3 interesting findings. I'm going to ask you about these. The first one I found was that gay males in the Canadian military had a higher risk of having or having had a major depressive disorder than did lesbian, bisexual, or heterosexual military personnel. Why might this be? And I'm going to ask you to please type why you think that might be true. Why would gay military men be more likely to be depressed than lesbian military women or bisexuals? Stealth thinks they might have been more likely to be victims of assault, sexual assault. It's a possibility. Any other theories? Because I have not seen the research that explains this. Social stigma? I will have to look that up, Tim, and if you will IM me, I will send that information to you when I can find it again. I really don't know why, but I think one possibility is male and military stereotypes that they couldn't meet up with. So here's another piece of information. Bisexual women are more likely to be depressed than gay men. Brian says, yes, the military is a very alpha male environment. Why is it likely that bisexual women are more likely to be depressed than gay men? Absolutely, Tim. That's absolutely true. Truer, because they are women. Dreamer, are you thinking that maybe women in general are more likely to be depressed than men? I'm not sure about that. Oh, men have more advantages. Ah. And again, I have not read the reason for this data, just that the statistics show. Abigail would like Dreamer to explain why men have more advantages, or that they do. Brian says bisexual women may have more trouble finding their place than gay men. Dreamer says medical research, etc., is more male inclined than female. That is surely for true. So lots of possibilities on those ones. Here's the third one. Now, this is from 2020 research. I thought that was important to note. Gay and bisexual men are more likely to suffer from depression than they are from HIV. Why might that be in 2020? Dreamer says lots of women die from a heart attack because they have different symptoms than men. Yes. So why, more recently, are gay and bisexual men more likely to suffer from depression than from HIV? Stealth says if a woman is bi, everyone expects them to consent to sex with everyone. But also a lot of people think bi is a temporary thing. Brian says new HIV treatments make it more manageable now, so there's more other things to be depressed about, right, Brian? Abigail says in the 80s, the LG community wanted to exclude bi people. So I just thought that was kind of interesting, some of these research things that you can find. And lack of appropriate treatment for depression and anxiety, of course, is a problem because it can increase the risk of suicidal behaviors. Now, this is also important. It does not appear that other types of mental health issues and illnesses, including loneliness, losses, and major mental illnesses such as bipolar and schizophrenia, those do not appear to be more common in the LGBT population than they are in other populations. So that's kind of a plus. I want to give you some pluses along with some negatives about health. Culturally sensitive mental health services can address all the problems. You want to find a therapist who puts you at ease, and I'm going to talk more about that later. But always be sure to identify yourself as gay or bisexual and see if the therapist is going to be supportive. If you're reluctant to seek assistance for depression or anxiety from medical professionals, please talk with a trusted friend, a loved one, or your pastor, anybody's pastor, it doesn't have to be yours. Sharing your feelings is often the first step toward treatment and recovery. Unfortunately, substance use disorders and the problems that they cause are common among this population. Lesbians, gay men, and transgender individuals are more likely than heterosexuals to use tobacco in any form. One survey showed that 42% of bisexual individuals, 30% of gay men, and 30% of lesbians used at least one tobacco product, and that compares to 25% of heterosexuals. The rate of heavy smoking is twice as high among lesbians, gay men, bisexual, and transgender persons as it is among heterosexuals. And we know that tobacco use increases a person's risk for developing heart and lung diseases and certain cancers. And it turns out those are the top killers of everybody. Alcohol use can cause permanent liver damage. We know that. Alcohol use among gay men, lesbians, and bisexuals of both genders seems to be higher than among heterosexual individuals. Differences based on sexual orientation are more pronounced for women, especially those reporting higher levels of perceived stigma that the women feel that they are stigmatized or more masculinity than for men. Now, I'm going to ask you a question again. Can you think of possible reasons why the actual percentage of LGBT persons with alcohol dependence issues may not be as high in truth as is being reported in research? Why do you think the research might be reporting too high of a number for alcohol dependence? Biases in medicine, there are such things. Self-selection, but it depends on the research method. Idiko, I think I'm with you on that one. Researchers sometimes recruit the interview subjects at gay bars because their subjects are easier to identify there. Don't you think that might skew the statistics? Yep. And Deb, you're right. They're misconceived as safe places. And Roxy says maybe not even testing enough of the heterosexual population against the same testing standards. So there's several possible reasons for all of these things. Okay, hang on a second. I need to change my group tag so that I'm not an orange cloud. I hope that works. There we go. Okay. Among non-heterosexual men, use of drugs such as amphetamine, cocaine, crystal meth, ecstasy, and marijuana is higher than among heterosexual men. These drugs can be highly addictive, plus, problematically, they impair judgment and decision-making, and that increases the risk of having unsafe sex and HIV transmission. Specific research has also discovered higher rates of cocaine and marijuana use among lesbian and bisexual women than by heterosexual women. So not all of the drugs are the same with different genders. The opioid epidemic, of course, has caused deaths across the entire population. It's actually more than car accidents or gun violence. And over 70% of drug overdoses deaths are from opioids. LGBT persons may be more susceptible to opioid overdoses due to several factors. Because they have higher rates of alcohol and men with meth use, they're also more likely to overuse opioids. And that is actually known as polysubstance use disorder. Lesbian women have more chronic pain and more comorbid mental health conditions than heterosexual women. And both of those, chronic pain and comorbid conditions, are risk factors for opioid use disorder. Opioids tend to get overprescribed for pain control after gender-affirming surgery. So trans individuals are also at risk for opioid use disorder. Men who have sex with men are more often exposed to opioids than are lesbian or bisexual women because of the proliferation of fentanyl-laced meth and co-injection of meth and opioids. If you or someone you care about has unhealthy or risky alcohol or drug use behaviors, it is important to seek medical help. Proper treatment can restore both mental and physical health. You can confidentially talk with and ask your healthcare provider for help if you're concerned about or trying to quit your drinking or drug use. Treatment can help restore mental and physical health and should be pursued by anyone showing signs of unhealthy or risky drug or alcohol use. Cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death worldwide. High rates of smoking and use of other tobacco products can lead to heart disease, as well as to high blood pressure. Heavy alcohol consumption and higher BMI also increase the risk of cardiovascular disease. The basics of good health, we know these: balanced diet, physical activity, healthy weight, all of those help prevent those health problems. Sexual minorities, however, have higher rates of modifiable risk factors for heart disease than do heterosexuals. Lesbian and bisexual women are more likely to have pulmonary and cardiovascular diseases than heterosexual women, and that's due to their higher risk factors of using tobacco and alcohol and being overweight. Gender-affirming hormones used by trans people also impact the risk of cardiovascular disease. People using feminizing hormone therapy have an elevated risk of venous thromboembolism, myocardial infarction, stroke, and osteoporosis relative to cisgender individuals. For trans people using masculinizing hormone therapy, there is an increased risk of polycythemia, as well as a probable higher risk of myocardial infarction. Strokes and heart attacks were found to be more common among lesbians and bisexual women than heterosexual women when they were past the age of 50. Older gay and bi men are more likely to experience chest pains related to heart disease than are straight men. Osteoporosis is a bone disease where the mineral density of bone decreases, changing the quality and structure of bones. The decrease in bone strength then increases the risk for fractures. A non-invasive bone density scan called DEXA can determine the health of your bones. Trans children and adolescents on gonadotropin-releasing hormone may be at risk for decreasing bone density while not on sex steroid hormone replacement. Trans adults using feminizing hormones may have a higher risk of osteoporosis relative to cisgender people. However, no differences in bone fracture rates have been seen in adult trans women or men in short prospective trials. This is another place where a lot more research is needed. People who have had their ovaries or testes removed for any reason and who have not had hormone therapy for 5 or more years absolutely should get a DEXA scan. So that includes people who are not alternate sexually, but who have had those surgeries. So should anyone over 50 who has the following risk factors. That's everyone who has been exposed to glucocorticoids. That's a type of steroid medication. Anyone in premature menopause, or anyone who has a parent who had a hip fracture. So for the general population, everybody. Now, transgender people have unique concerns about cancer. You have cancer is one of the scariest things a doctor can say to a patient. For most cancers, risk is associated with a family history of that type of cancer and the risk increases with age. However, certain behavioral factors such as smoking, alcohol consumption, and sexual history can increase the risk of cancer. Cancer screening saves lives because cancer can often be treated if caught early enough. But trans people may not get routine cancer screening if they are confused about whether they need to continue the exams they should have had before transitioning. The image here is a poster of two people with the message, "Paps Matter for Trans Men," and this was created by Rainbow Health Ontario. This was a campaign to educate transgender persons about the need to be screened for cancers of their pre-assignment surgery reproductive organs. Gender reassignment surgery does not always remove the reproductive organs of the birth gender. Trans men may still have a uterus, cervix, ovaries, or female breast tissues, and therefore they are at risk of cancer in those organs. Gender reassignment surgery for trans women does not remove the prostate. Therefore, they are at risk for prostate cancer, though this risk is probably low because of hormone treatment. Cancers related to the use of hormones by individuals undergoing gender reassignment are rare, but screening is still needed. Absolutely. Lesbians, gay men, and bisexual individuals also need cancer screenings. Everybody does. Everybody needs cancer screenings. These images show people who are getting a mammogram to detect breast cancer and another person having a digital rectal exam to detect prostate cancer. Excluding skin cancers, breast cancer is the most common form of cancer in women, and breast cancer can occur in men, cis men. Lesbian and bisexual women are at greater risk for breast cancer due to higher rates of smoking, alcohol use, and overweight. Unfortunately, they are also less likely to be screened for breast cancer than heterosexual women. It is not just awareness of medical care, Abigail. It's also feeling comfortable with medical care. And yes, men, there's a PSA blood test that can be used in addition to the digital rectal exam. Anyone whose breast tissue has been exposed to female hormones needs to have regular mammograms, no matter your gender orientation. Lesbian and bisexual women have an increased risk of developing certain gynecological cancers, but they're also less likely to receive regular gynecological health care, including pelvic exams and pap smears. It's important for lesbian and bisexual women to get these exams regularly because they are used to diagnose cancers and other gynecological conditions early when they have the highest treatment success rates. Because lesbians are less likely to have had children and less likely to use oral contraceptives than cis women, they may be at increased risk for certain endometrial or ovarian cancers. Anyone with a higher BMI, especially if it's accompanied by a high-fat diet, may be at greater risk for colorectal, ovarian, or endometrial cancers. Anyone, male or female, who has receptive anal sex has an increased risk of HPV infection, and that means a higher risk of developing anal cancer. And this all means that everyone needs to be aware of what screening tests they need at each age. And everyone, of course, should practice safer sex to avoid sexually transmitted diseases. Sexually transmitted diseases, there are a lot of them: gonorrhea, syphilis, chlamydia, and pubic lice, all of those actually have cures. But also hepatitis A, B, or C, human papillomavirus, that's the HPV, and HIV, and those unfortunately don't have cures, they only have limited treatments. To avoid these maladies, everyone should practice safer sex. And I'm not saying safe sex because there is no such thing. You may be able to recite the principles of safer sex in your sleep. I don't recommend that. Just for review purposes, I'm going to go over them. The best ways to have safer sex include committing to a long-term, mutually monogamous relationship with an uninfected partner. Always using condoms or some other barrier of protection. Avoiding engaging in unprotected sex unless both partners test negative for STDs. And not using drugs or overusing alcohol, because those things help you can help you engage in risky sexual behaviors. You have less awareness of what's going on. But maintaining good hygiene is another really important step to take in terms of safer sex. In addition to oral, vaginal, and anal contact with sex organs, sexually transmitted diseases can be transmitted through skin-to-skin contact, through mucous membrane contact, through seminal and vaginal fluids, menstrual blood, and sex toys. There are vaccinations that are useful against some sexually transmitted diseases. And these are vaccines against HPV and hepatitis A and B. You are much less likely to get those diseases from an infected partner if you're properly vaccinated. You can still get them, but you're much less likely. Stell says she wishes she had known back when they raised the age in which you could still get the HPC vaccine. At first they said you could only get it up to age 28, but then they changed the guidelines up to age 45. Right, you need to keep on top of all of these things. Your doctor should be keeping on top of all of those things. If you don't have an STD, you can't spread it to your partner. Now, men who have sex with men should also consider PrEP, P-R-E-P. PrEP is short for pre-exposure prophylaxis. It is a combination drug that is taken daily, and it can reduce the risk of HIV infection in those who engage in high-risk sexual behaviors. It is only available by prescription. There is information about how to get hold of PrEP in the note card that's in the giver box. Many people don't realize that fertility can be a concern for some LGBT persons. Gay men and lesbians who are in same-sex relationships and bisexual and trans individuals may wish to raise children as a family or as single parents. There's a new concept which applies in these situations called social infertility. And this differs from physiological infertility. Physiological infertility is when the parental sperm or egg is not capable of conception. Social infertility speaks to the need for some sort of assistance in order for a child to be conceived, despite the fact that the parents may be physiologically fertile. Some sexual health care providers offer services that facilitate these desired pregnancies, and these services include egg or sperm donation, either by a partner or an anonymous donor, fertility preservation before medical or surgical transition, donor intrauterine insemination, that's when the donor sperm are introduced into the uterus using a little tube, in vitro fertilization, where an egg is fertilized outside of the body, then implanted in the woman's uterus after it begins to develop, embryo donation, where a fertilized embryo that has been collected previously is donated to the person desiring pregnancy, and surrogacy, where the baby is actually carried by a volunteer. Now we want to change the topic and just look at it from 180 degrees. Undesired fertility. It may surprise you to learn that lesbian and bisexual female teens have higher rates of teen pregnancy than do heterosexual teens. All sexually active teenagers and women who identify as lesbian or bisexual may also still have sex with men and should be aware of the types of contraception that are available to them. Domestic abuse, which is also known as intimate partner violence, can occur in any intimate relationship. This diagram shows a series of concentric circles that are divided into several sections, and I'm going to read this to you because it's a little hard to read. The central circle is labeled power and control, because that is what abuse is all about. The 8 surrounding segments are labeled intimidation, coercion and threats, emotional abuse, economic abuse, isolation, using privilege, using children, and denying, minimizing, and blaming. Types of physical and sexual violence are named in the surrounding ring, and that includes things like hitting, choking, kicking, and biting. The outer ring is labeled heterosexism, homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia. Everyone should learn to recognize domestic abuse because it can occur in any relationship. Research has shown that transgender persons have a much higher risk of intimate partner violence compared to cisgender individuals, regardless of the sex of the transgender person assigned at birth. Lesbian and bisexual women experience more domestic violence than do heterosexual women, and bisexual women have a higher risk than lesbians. While 35% of heterosexual women have experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by a current or ex-intimate partner or date, that's a third of all women who are heterosexual. 43.8% of lesbian women, it's almost half, and 61.1% of bisexual women, that's almost 2/3, have had those horrifying experiences. Men who have sex with men are just as likely to face intimate partner violence as heterosexual women. However, they may hesitate to seek help because they fear that revealing their sexual orientation to others will put them in greater danger. Threatening to out a man as bisexual or gay to his family, friends, and coworkers is a not uncommon form of abuse. Unfortunately, differently gendered persons are less likely to seek help about domestic abuse than heterosexuals due to feared or actual stigma. Another unfortunate problem, few shelter facilities, safe houses, are designed to accommodate differently gendered abused persons. But staying in an abusive relationship causes anxiety, depression, and hopelessness. To break the cycle of abuse, you have to tell someone, a friend, a healthcare provider, or a clergy member, or you can call the domestic violence hotline to help create a plan to leave your abuser. There's information in the note card that explains how to do that, and the websites that I put in the note card have a quick escape button if somebody starts looking over your shoulder and you don't want them to see what you're looking at. You want to stop abuse early before verbal abuse escalates to physical violence. Safety from anti-LGBT violence is very important. Transgender and gender expansive people face a disproportionately high risk of physical and sexual violence from dates, family, friends, or strangers. The perpetrators seem to be motivated by hate or fear, and they lack understanding and acceptance. And this health risk is now recognized officially as a hate crime. According to the US FBI, anti-LGBT violence accounts for 11.6% of the hate crimes in the US. The only types of hate crime worse are racial and religious hate crimes. This violence may be verbal, you're not muscly enough. Why do people in the LGBT community more often have negative body images? Gender dysphoria, absolutely, Nick. That's a big one. Vanity, a cultural thing for many gay men. Exactly, Brian. Often it's due to the images that we see in media. A transgender person may be uncomfortable with their body's appearance compared to traditional standards of appearance. Gay and bisexual men may have grown up with images of thin, effeminate gay men or ultra-masculine, muscular male bodies. Low self-esteem, discrimination, and depression increase the impact of unrealistic body standards. And you just see the message on the sign that this guy is holding on that poster there? In general, men are less likely to seek treatment for eating disorders because of the perception that they are women's diseases. Transgender people often have to deal with the effects of hormone treatments. Hormone therapy is often used to make a transgender person appear more masculine or feminine, but the use of hormones has risks. Testosterone can damage the liver, especially in high doses or when it's taken orally. Estrogen can increase blood pressure, blood sugar, and blood clotting. Anti-androgens such as spironolactone can dehydrate you and disturb electrolyte balance and lower your blood pressure unnaturally. Common side effects of masculinizing hormone treatments are mood swings, increased acne, alopecia, pelvic or clitoral pain, headaches, and erythrocytosis, which is elevated red blood cell count. Common side effects of feminizing hormone treatments are decreased libido, mood swings, widespread rash, nausea and vomiting, and headaches. Transgender persons wishing to use hormones should only do so under the supervision of a doctor who can prescribe an appropriate dose and monitor its effects in order to avoid these dangerous and unpleasant side effects. Obtaining hormones from unauthorized sources can be very dangerous. Transgender persons also may be dealing with the effects of injectable silicone. Silicone oil is a liquid polymer that's often used as a sealant or lubricant. Transgender women may have silicone injected into their soft tissues to change their body shape as a gender-affirming treatment. Transgender people who do not have access to professional cosmetic surgery may seek out unmonitored silicone injections. They may be done by unlicensed individuals or unscrupulous medical professionals. Improper techniques performed by unlicensed practitioners can lead to poor results and even death. One problem with illicit silicone injections is that the silicone may not be medical grade. It may be contaminated with aircraft lubricant, mineral oil, tire sealant, petroleum jelly, or other nasty substances. The injection process may not be sterile and may induce embolization. If injection needles are shared, hepatitis can be the result. The volume injected during an unsupervised session often exceeds that used by practicing cosmetic technicians. And the injected silicone may shift in the body over time, and that causes really awful disfigurement. Non-traditionally gendered people must deal with minority stress in healthcare. For a person who belongs to any minority group, racial, religious, gender, whatever, stress is characterized by social stigma, that's negative social attitudes and disapproval of other people towards your identity. Discriminatory treatment towards your identity, which could include harassment, rejection, unfair treatment, abuse, or neglect. Personal internalization of social stigma, which means holding negative attitudes and thoughts about yourself. 56% of LGBTQ adults and 70% of gender nonconforming and transgender patients reported hearing harsh or abusive language from a healthcare provider. That is unacceptable. 2% of transgender persons and 8% of other sexual minorities have been denied care by medical professionals because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. That's horrible. And the situation is worse for trans youth than it is for adults. Factors other than societal stigma may be additional important predictors of healthcare mistreatment, such as healthcare workers' knowledge of and attitudes toward gender divergent people. Routine healthcare should be a priority for every human being. Although they may have additional considerations, transgender and gender expansive people have the same basic health concerns as cisgender people. LGBT healthcare is healthcare. Everyone needs holistic, preventive, primary care. Everyone deserves to get their healthcare in a supportive atmosphere from professionals who earn their trust. Preventive care and regular screenings are essential for good health. While nobody wants to think about developing bone loss, cancer, heart disease, or high cholesterol, early detection of these issues can mean more successful treatment and better outcomes. Finding respectful healthcare barriers. There are 3 general types of barriers to appropriate healthcare experienced by LGBT persons. There are structural barriers, financial, and personal cultural. Structural barriers include things like limited time for appointments that doesn't allow you adequate time to build trust. Managed care. They limit your choice of providers. Lack of legal recognition of partners. Financial barriers are not uncommon in all kinds of people, and lack of health insurance may result from the prohibition of spousal benefits from the insured person to their unmarried partner. Personal and cultural barriers include lack of cultural competence by healthcare professionals. Sometimes intake paperwork only offers you binary gender labels to check off and you don't feel they're comfortable. Negative stereotypes held by healthcare professionals. Your own fear or embarrassment about coming out to the healthcare provider. Counseling and education too often assume that if you're having sex, it's with an opposite gender partner. Public funding for women's health is usually centered on family planning and prenatal care. Some LGBT people may not consult healthcare services because they've had negative experiences with doctors in the past. For the best health possible, everyone should feel empowered to take an active role in their own health care by voicing concerns to practitioners if something doesn't seem right to you. You also should ask questions if you're unsure about any information. And you have to be forthcoming about your orientation, your medications, your past surgeries. Those all may affect treatment plans and preventive care options. When anybody is nervous or upset about a medical appointment, it can be helpful to have an advocate to be on your side or even with you. The advocate can help you obtain the care you deserve aids you in remembering what the doctor says to you so quickly and authoritatively, and the advocate can keep you focused on the important reason for your healthcare visit. Sometimes advocates are called patient navigators, and they may even be available from the healthcare provider, but they could also be a trusted family member or a friend. There's an article about patient navigators near the bottom of the note card in the giver box up here. It's a very important feature. In terms of finding an LGBT-friendly doctor, I would definitely invite you to look at the Gay and Lesbian Medical Association, GLMA. They have a website, and that is also toward the bottom of the note card that's in the giver box. But I'll put the link in live chat so that you can click that and save it. So that's a lot of information for one session. I hope you found some of it useful, and thank you for your attention this afternoon. Yes, rurality is a structural barrier. Rural communities often lack medical facilities. So I'm going to take down the slides. And I want everybody to be sure they get the note card. If they haven't, if you haven't missed it, get it now. It's in this box right here. There we are. Thank you, everybody, and have a good day.